mastering your language is very important. It's the tail's wagging the dog a little bit here, because the reality is to have the activity you need to be successful in the business, you will find that it can't be done if you're reinventing the wheel at every step of the process. If you go into a fact finder and you don't have a plan for what you're going to say and when you're going to transition from the fact finder, from the approach into the fact finder, if you don't have a plan, odds are it's not going to work. So you really have to work hard at memorizing your language so that it doesn't sound memorized. I tell my advisors that I want to wake them up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a flashlight in their face and say, give me the approach, and I want it word for word. I actually don't do that, but I tell them that I want them to be able to give me their language in their sleep. Phone language, the same thing every time. Knowing your responses, knowing how to respond. That's what a master does. You've got to have the language to do the activity. Doing the activity in large numbers will help you master the language. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know, but I know this. Advisors who want to be highly successful have a lot of work to do that first year. And one of the things they have to do is they have to work really hard at mastering their language. They have to work really hard at putting together all the pieces so it'll work. And it's frustrating. Sometimes you'll go out, you'll leave an appointment and it will not work. And you will leave and say, that was the worst thing I ever did. That's a wonderful moment, because at that moment you come back and say, that's not going to happen again. And you memorize the language. And the next time it's better. So every time you make a mistake, it's a building block for the next success. Telephoning and its importance. Telephoning is something you'll hear people say, I don't like the phone. And I jokingly say, well, go to the office manager, she'll get you a new one. And they say, no, you don't understand. I don't like calling people on the phone. And I ask them why not, and they say, well, I just don't like the rejection, or I don't like doing it. I have a philosophy on this. I don't think anybody, when we reach them on the phone, really wants to talk to us. The reality is every phone call we make is to somebody who would rather have not gotten that call from us. Let's face it. What we're going for is that moment at the end of the fact finder when we ask them, what value did you receive, if any, from our time together today? And they say, I got a lot of value. This was great. I'm glad I was referred to you. That moment is the moment we're going for. Not the moment where we maybe have to fight through 3 no's to get the appointment. So understanding that nobody wants to get our call, and understanding we're going for that moment at the end of the fact, that sets me free to pick up the phone and call anybody, since nobody wants to talk to me. Now, that first, that philosophy first, and then the dedication to make sure every day you are making enough phone calls to work toward your 26 ahead every week. Now, how many phone calls do you have to make? Well, that's based on your goals. There's so many new phone calls you have to make. We tell people at the beginning of each week you should have at least 10 fact finders scheduled for next week. Understanding the 40% cancellation rate, you'll keep 6, and you'll fact virtually everyone you talk to if you do it the right way. 4 times 6 is 24. With any luck, we'll get that 25th. And there we go. So 9 o'clock, why 9 o'clock? And a lot of people say, well, Jim, I don't get a lot of returns at 9 o'clock. I don't get a lot of people picking up at 9 o'clock. And I say, that's okay, leave messages. You've got to full court press and trap in the corners, to use a basketball analogy, on the phone every single day. The phone has to be something that you're dedicated to. 9 to 10, you can make 20 to 30 dials depending on how much the person on the other side of the phone talks and how efficient you are, and you can get those out of the way. If you will make 40 to 50 dials a day as a new financial rep, you will fill up your schedule. And then you can back it down to maintain your appointment schedules at that 25 to 30 ahead range. If you will start off at 40 to 50 dials a day, and I've known people in our organization that have made 70, 80, 100 dials a day when they needed to. That's great, that's fine. But you can't do it every other day. You've got to touch that phone every single day, and you've got to be marching toward that next week where you leave on Friday knowing I've got 30 appointments scheduled for next week. What a wonderful feeling that is. Scheduling the next appointment. I get a lot of pushback on this when I'm coaching my producers. In this day and age, with everybody having an electronic appointment schedule, and people will say, "Well, why don't you call me?" Or when I get back to my office, I'll look on my computer and I'll know what my schedule looks like. This is a moment of truth. This is a moment where you're going to find out whether you have an open case or not, because at the end of a very productive fact finder, scheduling that next appointment becomes paramount. If you let it go, you really don't have an open case, in my opinion. You might feel like you do, but now you're starting the game of phone tag. And that's debilitating to you, and it's debilitating to the client. So the language sounds something like this. What time next week should we schedule our next appointment? What's your schedule look like next week, same time? And they say, well, why don't you give me a call? I don't know what my schedule looks like. And I'll say, well, let's pencil something in at a time that you think you'll probably be available. And then if you get back to the office and you find out that's not good, call me, we'll reschedule it. But if you do it at least 48 hours before the appointment, that would really help me, because I try to schedule myself really tight to be as efficient as I can for my clients. Fair? If they fight you more on that, you gotta master language to make sure that at the end of that meeting, if they aren't scheduling the next appointment, with some exception, there are some reasons, but very few. If they won't schedule that appointment, you don't have an open case. At that point, you say, well, let me put you in my system, and I'll call you back in 6 months, around your birthday or 6 months past your birthday. I run my system based on your birthday. Would that be okay? And if you don't have an open case, they're going to say that's just fine. That's just fine. If you do have an open case, they'll say, no, I want to see you next week. I really do, but I really feel uncomfortable scheduling the next appointment. Stay in there and say, let's pencil something in, and you call me and reschedule when you find out that's not good. Posting and planning, the new term, it's not that new, is called best practices. If you want to model a successful producer, they might not call it posting and planning, but at the end of each day they stop and they look at what they did that day. They're probably going to write it down, and they're planning tomorrow so that when they put their head on the pillow at night, they're going to wake up with a sense of enthusiasm about their day, knowing what they've got. Al Granum has taken that success best practice, and he's put it under the title of posting and planning. It is the most important thing that we do at the end of a day, and skipping it will take away our enthusiasm. So if at the end of the day I get done and I stop and I take 15, 20 minutes and I pull out my client builder book and I post the numbers left to right, and I think about it as I put down the name. As I put down the referrals, I think about the person that referred them to me. I think about those people and the fact that I'm going to call them tomorrow or the next day. When I fill in the box for the fact finder, I think about that fact finder. I go to the open case. I think about what I'm going to propose. When I go to the close, I think about the things I have to do to make sure that I complete that tomorrow, sitting down with my assistant to make sure that we're copacetic. When I submit a case, that's a feel good. And when I look down at my report that comes from my home office and it tells me that a case has gotten approved, and I get to write it down there. And then when I go to the far right and I do my scorecard for the day, that's really, in my mind, a business diary. Some of the great leaders of the world, going back to Benjamin Franklin and John Quincy Adams, kept diaries. And you can go to their libraries now and you can find those journals. This is a business journal. It's very, very important. But the most important part of it is the planning for tomorrow. Looking at tomorrow's schedule and saying, do I have enough appointments? Maybe I need to make a couple of additional phone calls now to plug somebody in for a prospecting meeting or a fact-finding meeting. If I can put together a perfect day tomorrow, it's not going to end up perfect, but if I can put it together, and then I look at each person and I say, what could I accomplish there? What I like to do is I like to say, how many points could I get? How many referrals could I get? Am I going for a case open? Is it a closing interview? Is it a delivery? And am I prepared to prospect? Do I have prompting lists available? So if I look at the day and I plan it out based on the maximum point total I can get in that day, then I start getting really excited. And when I walk in the door, when I go home, I'm excited. My family says, boy, Dad loves his career. My wife says, boy, it's great to have a husband who loves what he does, or a wife who loves what she does. And I'm in a good mood, and when I wake up the next morning, I'm raring to go to get and see if I can produce that day that I planned. So posting and planning is so important. And what you find is the majority of producers forget to do it. They don't do it. They post and plan once a week, and they're missing the blessing. They're just missing the blessing. The blessing is to do it each day and to have that left to right experience and the planning for tomorrow experience. That's a beautiful thing, and it needs to be formed as a habit, just like everything else in our business. Being passionate about the business and having a missionary zeal and a sense of urgency, again, is the tail wagging the dog. What comes first? When I started in the business, I didn't know how long I was going to be in this business. But what happened is, as I got in and I started impacting people's lives, and I started looking at the products I was selling and how good they were, and I started hanging around people who were having an impact greater than mine at that time, it was hard for me to control the passion that I had for the business. And I made a decision very, very quickly upon entering the business that I never wanted to do anything else with my life. This was going to be my life's work. My personal story, my father died when I was 3 years old of a heart attack. And the week before he died, an insurance agent came into the house to sell my mom and dad a life insurance policy. My dad had none. And my mother says he remembers at the end of the meeting it was a reasonable amount and a reasonable premium. But my mom and dad said what so many people do, let us think about it. And the proposal went on the counter in the kitchen on the corner. And that Friday night, my dad had chest pains, went upstairs, ended up going to the hospital, and died at 1 a.m. on Saturday morning of a heart attack. And when my mom got back from the funeral, the proposal was still sitting on the kitchen table, or the kitchen counter. The most important decision my mom and dad ever made financially was that week before my dad died, and they didn't know it at the time, and I don't think the advisor knew it. Had he known it, he might have stuck in there a little longer. He might have pressed a little harder. He might have put his language together a little better. He might have had a little more punch to his presentation. We don't know the situation following every one of our appointments. We might be helping somebody make the most impactful decision for their family, and we've got to treat each one of those moments as if it is that moment. And there's the sense of urgency. We've got to figure out how to stay in there and not make this a casual purchase that can take weeks of phone calls and thinking about it. That's how you buy a washing machine. That's how you buy tires for your car. That's how you buy a car. That's not how you buy life insurance. You buy life insurance you don't buy life insurance unless you need it, and you need it yesterday. So that missionary zeal, that passion, that sense of urgency is all one thing that comes together. That we've got to manage that, and we've got to manage it for the good of the people that we're calling on. And if we'll do that, again, we'll make an impact. I will tell you now, I wouldn't be in the business if I hadn't figured out how to handle that passion, if I hadn't figured out how to handle that truth inside of me that I knew what I was doing was vitally important for the people I was talking with. And today, even though I've been in the business 30 plus years, I still have it, and I don't think it's going anywhere. And I'm channeling it now. Most of how I challenge it is through other people.